What's going on, Cowboys Nation and people all over the world, man? How y'all doing out there this morning, or not this morning? How y'all doing this afternoon, evening, or wherever you are? It might be morning somewhere. But I wanted to do this video and react to the death of Jim Brown. He was 87 years old, and he was known as an activist. And that's really what I saw in the article. But most of us, we know Jim Brown as one of the greatest football players of all time, if not the greatest football player of all time. Jim Brown meant so much to a lot of people, including myself. And I know that Jim Brown played, in the 50s and the 60s. But Jim Brown was a legend. He was an icon. Jim Brown was one of the first, during the time where, we're integrating things. And he was one of the first black football players to do it in college. And I really just remember hearing about Jim Brown. I mean, I knew about Jim Brown because of Emmitt Smith. Emmitt Smith is my favorite player of all time. And you hear guys like Emmitt Smith and Barry Sanders always talk about Jim Brown and what he meant to them and how they really, just tried to be like him. And I know that at one point, Barry Sanders didn't break. He did break Jim Brown's record, but I think he broke Jim Brown's record. I can't even think off the top of my head because I'm just blind reacting right now. But I know he wouldn't break Walter Payton's record. But Walter Payton, it meant so much to Walter Payton to break that record. And Jim Brown, I remember reading a book about Walter Payton as a kid because, man, if you had Tecmo Bowl, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Walter Payton was the best player in the game outside of Bo Jackson. And so that's how I knew about Walter Payton. So growing up, Emmitt Smith, his favorite guy was Walter Payton. Barry Sanders' favorite guy was Walter Payton. So I read about Walter Payton, and everything that Walter Payton did was he was chasing Jim Brown. And knowing that, I wanted to know some more about Jim Brown. And really my first encounter with knowing who Jim Brown was the movie Mars Attacks, which is kind of funny because that movie was hilarious. But, his character was kind of like an ex-athlete, Vegas show person or whatnot, right? So you don't think of Jim Brown being an activist and all of that type of stuff when you think about Mars Attacks. But when you start reading more into it, you start hearing him talk. He was a guy who was unapologetically black. And for a black male as myself, I really could identify with that. And, I really appreciated a lot of the work that Jim Brown did. As a football player, as an icon, he was a guy that, and on top of that, he was, I think, a hell of a lacrosse player from what I understand. From what I understand, I think he was regarded by some as the greatest lacrosse player to ever play as well. And my guy, Coach Kirk Peterson over at Flint Hill, that's what he does in order to recruit kids over to play lacrosse. But I say all that to say this, man. Jim Brown was very, very special. And without a Jim Brown, we don't get a Emmitt Smith. We don't get a Barry Sanders. We don't get a Walter Payton. We don't get a LaDainian Tomlinson. We don't get a Jerome Bettis. We don't get those type of guys. We don't get a Floyd Little. We don't get those type of guys. You know what I'm saying? Like Jim Brown was the start, and he was a pioneer of what we look at football players to be today and how they conduct themselves on and off the field. And I really appreciate that. So I really wanted to do this video to express my appreciation for Jim Brown, express my gratitude for the legacy that he left behind. And I urge you guys, really, if you don't know anything about Jim Brown, to really, research. Look up some of the things that I told you about Walter Payton, Emmitt Smith, Barry Sanders, and some of those guys. Because that's off the top of my head all I could really, say. But it's a sad moment, but at the same time, I know that Jim Brown gave his all, 110% on this earth. And I know that his legacy lives on through a lot, including myself. His legacy will live on through me as well. But I appreciate that. Also appreciate all of the love that you guys have given the channel as of late. Thank you so much. I express my gratitude. I say that humbly and respectfully. Appreciate you guys. Peace.